I said I had to do something because I didn't want them to take my kids away because my kids was, well, all I had to live for. So I had a pillow, a couch cushion in my closet. And that's what I had went in my room and got my daughter and put her in the couch cushion. And I had it was a kind of like a little fire pit out in my backyard. And I put my daughter in a pillowcase and went out there and then I set it on fire.
And you heard correctly. We are about to watch the Iowa parole hearing of a momster, I dare call her a mother, who only recently was sentenced to 78 years in prison for doing this to her daughter. Yes, the sentencing came in 2011, 78 years. So you might ask, how is it possible that she's up for parole? And the short answer is that what we have learned, sentencing, they're gimmicks. They are designed to make press releases like the one we just saw to show that they are locking away those who do their most horrendous. But it's just a gimmick. Now, we're about to watch a gimmick of a parole hearing out of the state of Iowa. Let's see how this momster does, and let's see how the parole board reacts. I'll unpack it with all the details.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Could you please say your name and your state number for me, please?
Pamela Harris, 111-3296.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. I appreciate that. I'm going to explain the process to you, okay?
Okay.
My name is Jesse Rincon. My colleagues today are Renee Shonte to my right and James Moses. We'll be conducting your interview today. This meeting is considered to be in a public forum, meaning that the public and the media can listen in, but they cannot participate. We can possibly discuss confidential information such as your mental health, substance abuse, or medical history. Do you understand this, and are you willing to proceed?
Yes.
Okay. So how this works is I'll start off by asking you to describe the crime in detail. What was going on in your life at that time and what brought you to prison? After that, my colleagues and myself might have a few questions for you to answer. After you completed our questioning, I'll ask you if you have anything for the board that you prepared or you want us to know. After you've done that, we'll go into what's called deliberation, meaning we're going to make a decision. At that time, just sit back and listen. Once we've made our decision, I'll come back to you and explain the decision the best I can, okay?
Okay.
All right, so let's start off by taking a deep breath and just start off by telling me what happened that day, what was going on in your life, and just give me the process you went through.
Well, the day that happened, I was like 8.5 months pregnant with 6 kids. I was like lonely, depressed a little bit, had a little anxiety. But the day that my crime occurred, I took my 2 younger kids to school, my 11-year-old and my 8-year-old to school, and I had my 3 and 4-year-old and Cecilia, my 18-month-old, was home. And they was playing around in my room. I had the smallest room in the house. My daughters was jumping in the bed because, I let them jump in the bed. Cecilia, which is my 18-month-old, she kind of cracked her head off the door where the latch is at. And she was bleeding a little bit. Well, she was kind of bleeding a lot. So I kind of panicked a little bit. I called my sister and asked her, what did she think I should do? And she told me to put a cold rag on her head, which I did. And so I changed my sheets and put Cecilia in a bathtub to clean up the blood because there was a lot of blood everywhere. And I got a dry towel and put her in my room. And she had her hands like this. And then when I was putting on her shirt, her chest was kind of caving in a little bit. So I kind of got scared and nervous a little bit, and I tried to give her CPR. Well, I thought I was doing it right. I don't know if I was or not. And then she threw some bio in my mouth. So, and then she like passed away. So, I had got my cell phone and called this lady who, I knew for a long time, and she watched my kids before for me, and my 8-year-old went to the same school as her kids. And I told her I didn't feel good, and I asked her if she can watch my 3 and 4-year-old and pick my other kids up from school to spend a night. And then after she picked them up, I kind of went in there and I lay with my daughter or whatever. I took a nap or whatever because I was sad. And so I went to sleep for a few hours and just laid there, and I got up from my nap and I looked at her for a little bit. And then I went in my front room and I was pacing around a little bit. And I was telling myself that if I called the police, they was going to take my kids away. And I just kept telling myself that. And I went in my front room closet. I said I had to do something because I didn't want them to take my kids away, because my kids was, well, all I had to live for. So I had a pillow, a couch cushion in my closet. And that's what I had went in my room and got my daughter and put her in the couch cushion. And I had it was a kind of like a little fire pit out in my backyard. And I put my daughter in a pillowcase and went out there and then I set it on fire.
So when your kids were being picked up, did that person that picked up your children before this incident happened, did they know what happened to your daughter?
No, she asked me, was Cecilia coming with me with them? And I said, no, she was asleep. So I was just gonna stay home with her and take a nap, is what I told them.
So at that time, were you trying to process what to do next with the time you had with the children gone?
No, I just wanted to go to sleep, because when I get stressed out and depressed, I just take a nap, so I was scared and I didn't know what to do. So I felt like if I took a nap, then maybe I could have thought about what I was going to do next. And after I took a nap, I just walked through the house and I, walked back and forth. And I just kept telling myself I didn't want them to take my kids away from me. And I told myself that I had to do something. But before that, I called my mom and I told her something bad happened and I didn't know what to do. And I was crying really bad. But my mom, she just cried with me. And I got really upset, and because I didn't want her to cry with me, I just wanted her to tell me everything was going to be okay and to give me a little advice, but I hung up on her. So
Go ahead.
I hung up on her, and then I chose to do what I did.
So I'm just trying to process why, if your fear was losing your children and you said, they meant the world to you, why not call the authorities and try to have it done? It was an accident from what it sounds like. it was a pure accident that could have been resolved in a different way. Why didn't you trust that?
I didn't trust that because I was afraid of the DHS from an incident that happened with my oldest daughter. And when somebody called her or something happened, then they called a DHS office on me, and then the DHS come into my life. And that's what happened. They come in my life, and to me, I felt like every time somebody called a DHS or something happened to one of my kids, then they tried to take one of my kids, and I felt like my kids was all I had to live for. And I was really, and I didn't want to lose my kids, because I told myself that, and this was something like a unrealistic belief that I did have, in a fear of me losing my kids, because I told myself that I couldn't live without my kids, but apparently by me being here, that obviously I could live without my kids. So with that being said, I made a poor decision because of the fear of, I didn't want them to take my kids away.
Where are your kids now?
My kids was in foster home, but most of them is grown up. And I got a 14-year-old, she live in South Carolina, and I got a 17-year-old that they stay in Dubuque.
Well, I appreciate you answering the questions I had. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, see if they have any questions for you, okay?
Yes.
All righty. Renee or James?
How you doing this morning, Ms. Harris?
I'm a little nervous, but I'm all right.
Okay. I saw that you had some contact with gangster disciples. Was that who you represented, or was that who you were affiliated with or a part of?
No, sir, I don't, I'm not in the game. So I don't understand how that was in there. That was in my report, because I'm not a gang member.
Okay. Did you have any involvement early on before you were identified?
No, sir.
Okay, no affiliations, hung out with them from where you grew up or anything like that?
But where I grew up, yes, I did. My brother was a gang member, but I was not.
Okay. So was his affiliation with Gangster Disciples?
Yes.
Okay. When you spoke of DHS and you had previous bad experience with DHS, did you think about talking with someone else other than whom you had the bad experience with?
Is that with the DHS? I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, so like DHS has different levels. You have an individual person who works with you or works with maybe your sister, some sort. But then that person has superiors or have other staff that they work with. And you had basically stated that you had some bad experiences, which was my understanding. So was there ever any type of other considerations to talk with someone else through that bad experience, kind of like what we call a grievance?
Oh, no, sir.
Okay. Okay.
Well, what I meant by the bad experience, like with the DHS, it was, I had an incident with one of my other children, and my oldest daughter got taken away from me, and I had to fight to get her back. And the DHS didn't feel like the children at Lightham people didn't feel that my daughter should return home, and I fought to get her back. So in Dubuque, they play game, like they call it DHS when they get mad at you, and then they also showed up from the bad experience that I had with them, from something that like involved one of my kids, and one of my baby daddies like fought me, and the DHS had to get involved, and they came into my life. That's what I meant by I had a bad experience, because I felt like when somebody called the DHS officer on me, I always thought that they was gonna take my children away from me.
And I really appreciate you sharing that, because that extra information helps to provide insight to your experience. Okay. Since you've been incarcerated and grieving about choices and decisions that you made that, resulted from this incident, one question I have for you is that what helps to make you better today than you were prior to being incarcerated?
I think that I learned a lot since I've been here, because when I was out in the free world, I had a lot of unrealistic beliefs, and I feel like my pride got in the way of a lot of bad choices and decisions that I made when I was on the outside. And I didn't want to feel like I was weak when I was on the outside, and my pride got in the way, and I was scared to reach out for help when I was on the outs, because of the rejection that I was getting. I was afraid of somebody telling me no, and I felt like I wasn't like worthy of somebody helping me out, like within like my family, and I felt like an outsider. So when I reached out for help with my family, either they was either too busy, or they didn't have the time, or I had to pay them. And since I've been in here, I learned that it's okay to reach out for help, whether I get rejected or not. If one person say no, then I would just call somebody else and ask them for some help. And I learned it's okay to talk about my feelings, despite of how, if it make me feel ashamed of the choices and the decisions that I made, because I have tried to go to therapy on the outside, and when I they ask me to ask them how I'm feeling about the decisions that I made, and when I try to give my honest opinion of how I was feeling or why I made the choices I made, when the body language changed, it made me feel like I'm being judged. So I cut my answers short, and I tell them thank you, and then I left. And I never went to therapy when I've been out here, but since I've been here, I talked to my unit psychiatrist, and I go to medical and talk to a lady named Misty, and I found that it helped me out a lot to talk to somebody and express some things that I've been throughout my life. Because when I was out there living and taking care of my kids, I didn't know that some of that stuff was still affecting the choices and the decisions that I made. And me talking to somebody and getting it out, as much as I felt like me talking to somebody didn't help, I realized when I was talking to the psychiatrist here that it actually helped me out a lot, and helped me like deal with some of the stuff that I was holding on to from my past. And me talking to them, it helped me, look at stuff a different way than, to realize that I ain't in control of, nobody else's opinion. I'm only in control of like myself and my actions and reactions of the choices that I made in my life.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. I appreciate you sharing that because in your comments, I can hear it in you. Some of that work that you have been a part of. And I can see sometimes some difficulty in terms of, that pride that you said that you struggled with, being able to share that amongst individuals, just the sharing alone from your voice is everything. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit with us today. And that concludes my question.
Thank you.
Thank you, James. Renee?
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of things. So it looks like you have a history of using some alcohol. Were you using or drinking any time since you were pregnant at that time? Were you drinking any alcohol at the time of this crime?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Alcoholism, I was, well, when I first moved to Dubuque, I was hanging around with some not bad people, but I was hanging around with some negative, not positive people. And well, drinking was one of their things. So that was like it was like a comfort to me because my mom wasn't the greatest care mom. So I was kind of like a rebellion. I was drinking from when I was 15 up until I was 17 and like a really bad alcoholic until I got pregnant with my first son. And then I kind of stopped drinking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So my background is in behavioral health, mental health, and I've worked a lot with human services. So I 100% understand the story that you told us today about HHS involvement and how that made you feel and all of those kinds of things. But talk to me now that you know something different and you've worked with your psychiatrist, had you had to go back to that day, and I know you've thought this through in your mind, what could you have done differently that would have not resulted where we are today?
Well, if I could go back to that day, the first thing that I would have did, my first decision, instead of calling somebody to come pick up my kids, I would have called the police. I would have called the police and told them what happened, and I would have sit there and waited until they got there. I mean, I know I can't take back that day. I wish I could. And, it hurt me. It hurt me a lot.
Yeah. So it sounds like you did end up through this, you've lost your kids now are either in foster care or have grown up without you. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. So you ended up losing exactly what you were afraid of losing in the way this was handled, correct?
yes.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your future. So since you've been in, you've done a lot of training, you've done a lot of treatment. So can you tell me something that you've done in treatment that you learned, something you learned in treatment, or something that you told me some work already that you've done with a psychiatrist, but what else have you been doing and using your time while you've been incarcerated?
I really learned some really good coping skills. I learned how, like if I get into like a bad situation, instead of me like acting off my impulse, and off of my emotions, I learned some good coping skills, like when I get worked up or if I'm sad or get angry, I'd listen to music or I go talk to either my roommate or go talk to a staff member. I normally go down to the medical health services and talk to the nurses. And I like to listen to music or I go walking. Walking was like a really good thing for me to like calm myself down, or I go call one of my children because sometimes I feel like hearing their voices, I don't tell them like nothing I went through or what I was going through. I call them to like recenter myself and and then like working, I like working, I worked the whole time that I've been here because I like keeping myself busy. I kind of do some community service, so it make me feel good to like help others out, to like be supportive of some people, or like somebody come to me with like advice. I like helping out and like sharing my opinion, like if it's something that I've been through and I feel like I can help somebody else out, then I choose to like give some people a lot of advice. And I go to church sometimes to, like get a little help and to like, put me in a place where I feel like I need a little encouragement. So I kind of go to the religious service to put me back in a okay place too.
Okay, so speaking of all of that, then what are your plans for support if we were to let you go? What does that look like for you with the community? Who would you use to continue those supports?
I would reach out to my family. I'm going to a new town that I never been to before, which I feel like that'll be good for me for like change. But I would reach out to the community in Ottumwa and reach out to some church services and like lean on my family until I get reestablished back into society.
Okay, and then what type of work would you do if we were to release you?
Well, I know I'm really good at fast food, but I would be looking into some factory work because I'm good at factory too. So I was planning on putting in applications in plastic or JBL, and the psychiatrist told me that is a fast food place called Mike's. So I was gonna like reach out to that place too.
Okay, and it looks like you've done some community college classes. Is that something you'd be interested in, is continuing your education?
Well, yes, I would like continue some of that, but I like in the future, but I would prefer to establish like
Mhm.
establishing myself in a community first and obtaining some employment and saving up so I can be be successful and not like struggle a little bit. I want to establish my life just a little bit.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for answering my question. I don't have any.
James, is there any follow-up?
No.
Okay. Ms. Harris, this is the time, if you have anything you want the board to know before we go into deliberation, you have the floor. So if there's anything you want us to know, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to come before you guys, and thanks for just listening to me. And that's it.
Thank you. So just go ahead and sit back. You can hear us deliberate. You don't participate at this time. Once we're done and we come to a decision, we'll come back to you, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Colleagues.
All right, I'll go first. So this is a really, really hard case, and it's a terrible story about a really, really bad day that culminated in the death of one of our own children and some other decisions that were made that day that for most people seem unforgivable and just not explainable. But the history of trauma and all of the other things that have happened with the previous children in the home and the involvement with human services, which looks like fairly extensive involvement with human services, as much as I don't fully understand and can say that I would do the same thing, I can get it. I can understand how we got here today. And it's very sad. She was a single mom with a whole lot of kids. Somebody got hurt. It's not like you're going to have the insurance and the ability to take somebody to a hospital when you're not sure what to do. And so some really bad choices of trying to not lose her children. And so looking at all of this, we can't take that day back. She can't take that day back. She's got a lot of protective factors. She's done tons of work inside. She's completed all of the training that she's been required and then some, including some additional higher level education. She's been working with a psychiatrist and working on her mental health and learning more about herself. And so I am going to be supportive of the work release to the Ottumwa diversion. I know we have to have no contact with minors due to the type of crime that was committed. I also would have mental health on the 40A and substance use evaluation. And then I would add the 50A since there is a history of alcohol abuse. And I think that is it.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, like my colleague was saying, and I was in agreement initially, before she stated so eloquently, just, a lot of, trauma took place, that surrounded this incident, but could understand, being 8.5 months pregnant at that time, and then, 6 kids, and just going through having too much pride and having a lot of things is no excuse to make the choices and decisions that she did make. But, in light, you can kind of understand what, was kind of going on through being traumatized. With that, her sharing and the things that she's been able to accomplish inside with furthering education, doing all the things that she can to better herself. I could personally hear it in her that she sounds like someone different and someone who is wanting to do better. And, as she stated, she wants to work herself back into the community that she's looking to transition into. So with that being said, I too am in agreement with DOC's recommendations. I think we're looking at a WRG C11P. Didn't know if that would include a 10B or a 10C, so if not, then don't worry about that. But adding the 20A for the minor. The other thing was looking at was the 40A with substance abuse and mental health, her working with the psychiatrist and continuing to work through the trauma that she experienced that evolves around this incident. The one thing I was thinking about, as my colleague was talking about, since she's looking to transition into the community, I was wondering what your thoughts are with community service, which it could be a good way to get to know people, interact, doing some of that service work and building some relationships that, has not maybe been established for some time. And then I am in agreement with 50A with the history, just as a safeguard, making sure that's in place.
How many hours you think for community service, James?
I'm agreeable with 40. Nothing that, maybe precludes her from, other opportunities, but just to get that, 5 to, so hours during the week, that could be helpful through the transition.
You think Renee on that?
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
Okay. Well, this is like you said, Renee, it was a tough case, but there's a lot of things that probably wouldn't have been highlighted unless you asked her some of them questions. Her treatment, she's done her treatment as we spoke of. Her interviews seem to be very truthful. She's learned some coping skills. She's seen a psychologist. I saw some remorse in her interview. There was a lot going on with the DHS involvement, the prior alcoholism, and then the stress of just 6 kids being alone and everything else that goes with that. My roadblocks were there was a lot of stopping points in the incident that could have happened when the child was hurt. She could call it. There's a lot of she could have in those moments, but taking in fact the stressors that was going on in her life. She's been down since 2011. It's a significant time. So I'm going to go ahead and agree with the DOC recommendation on this one with the WRG C11P, the 30A with the being around minors, the 40A with the mental health and substance abuse, the 50A for alcohol prohibition. the 40 hours of community service as well. I just think that she's done what she needs to do, and I don't know if there's any more programs that we can put her through at this point. Ms. Harris, I'm going to come back to you. We are going to release you to work release, okay? What you heard us discuss were some of the codes that are going to go along with it. It's the WRGC 11P gets you to work release. 30A is you're going to have permission to be around minor children, okay? And that'll go through your PO. The 40A is for substance abuse and mental health, and we need to continue to stay engaged with that. The 50A is alcohol prohibition, no alcohol, period. And we also like you to do 40 hours of community service, and that can be also with your PO. There's various places you can do that at. So you will be released to work release. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I just would like to say thank you.
You're welcome. And that will conclude this interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go out and do well, Ms. Harris.
Thank you.
Let me sum up the insanity of what we just watched. Let me sum it up by repeating what Reen, the woman in the middle, this parole board member, said. She said, a terrible story about a really bad day that culminated in the death of one of her children. And for most people, this seems unforgivable and unexplainable. Yes, lady. Definitely unexplainable for most people. And then she goes on to say, but the history of trauma and all the things that happen in the history of her home and the involvement of human services, all that I can say is that I get it. I get it. And then she goes on to say, someone got hurt. It's not like you can take them to the hospital with insurance and everything. What? What are you talking about? We are talking about a mother who the DA was charging her with first-degree murder. Her children were set up to testify against her in court. And because the DA does what they do a plea deal instead. They give her 78 years. It's supposed to be run consecutive. She should have no chance of getting out. And somehow up for parole. And paroled. You know why she had a problem with DHS? It was because in 2020, she left her 5-year-old in the home alone with her other kids, and it resulted in them lighting the house on fire. And the 2-year-old daughter at the time was severely burned. She has a long record. She was charged 4 charges of assault, negligent abandonment. They have stories of her beating her children. Black and blue eyes, abuse. It goes on and on and on. How dare the parole board sit there and say, I understand? It's crazy. There was no empathy, not one tear, not an attempt at faking empathy, nothing. As a matter of fact, when they say if you could change one thing that day, what would it be? And it would be that she would call the police. Not that she wouldn't do whatever it was to prevent her daughter from dying. And it's my belief, and again, it was the district attorney's belief, that she murdered her daughter. It says right here in this document, which is some type of, I don't know where the source is from, but what it says is what I believe happened. Tamelia picked little Cecilia, who was nicknamed Cece, up by her arms and shook her. After shaking her, she threw her and slammed her head into the headboard. Tamelia then picked her baby back up and threw her into the closet and let her cry herself to death. 20-month-old Cece died alone in the dark closet. Her siblings could hear her crying. The parole board thing, what they said, Moses, he's nuts. They're all nuts, actually. When you spoke to DHS and you had previous bad experience with DHS, did you think about talking with someone else at DHS other than whom you had the bad experience with? Wow! Even she had no idea what he said. His word salad, it's something else. Here's what she did. Here's what she said. I wrote it down word for word. The day my crime occurred, I took my 8-year-old and 11-year-old to school. My 3-year-old and 4-year-old were home. My daughter was jumping on the bed. She cracked her head on the latch. She was bleeding. I called my sister and she said, put a cold rag on her head. I cleaned my sheets and I put her in the bathtub and I saw her chest was caving in. I gave her CPR and she threw up in my mouth and passed away. I called someone and asked if she could watch my kids and pick up my kids from school. After that, I was sad. I took a nap. I laid with my daughter. And then I was pacing back and forth and I was telling myself, if I call the police, they will take my kids. So I went into the front room closet and I took my kids away. No way. And I didn't want them to take my kids away because of that was all I had to live for. Wow. Yeah, it's all you have to live for. So I took my daughter, I took her to the fire pit in my backyard and I set her on fire. And then, she lied. She told everyone that she moved. She told her kids she moved. It took months, so they found the charred remains of her child in there. And what does the parole board say? She actually uses the word, Reen says, I understand. Can't make it up. What do they say at the end of the parole hearing? I see that her pride got in the way. Oh my God. Oof. And they're like talking like, well, if you had fear of losing your children, then why didn't you just call the police? You see, you lost them anyway. It's like, do you not realize what happened here? And they release her. I don't even know how it's possible. Again, she was sentenced to 78 years in prison consecutively on 6 counts. Where's the math go? How is it possible that in 14 years since the time of the sentencing on a 78-year sentence, she has parole? Consecutive. And again, this is a thing with the DAs and how they're two-faced. It's like they could have taken this to trial. I think they knew exactly how the law is written, that it's going to be parole. But they like to issue the press releases. They like to act all tough. No one knows. And then the parole happens in the back, and And now that we're streaming it, we can actually see how crazy this stuff is. But for the most part, people just won't believe it until you see it. And I there's so much more that I want to say when it's these type of hearings that you lose track. But so many things the parole board said that's just disturbing. They literally are condoning her behavior, saying they understand it, saying they understand that they're making DHS the bad guys. And summing it up, that the only thing that she did wrong was take her baby and burn her. The only thing. And lied to the police and lied to everybody about where she was, right? The only thing. They actually are something like that's what happened, that her daughter was jumping on the bed and died. Like, where's the, where? And for those of you new to parole hearings, the parole board is allowed to challenge outside of what it says on the paperwork. We see it all the time in Louisiana. They will say, I know that you pled to this and that, but we don't believe your story. What happened? This parole board is clueless. Imagine if this was a Miss Bonnie Jackson, Mr. Roche, Mr. Marabella, really any of them. They wouldn't have stood for this. They would have said, you need to accept the fact of what you did. You're still in danger. You don't have the ability to feel empathy. You need another program. Anyways, that's it. That's my 2 cents. Thank you, Sir Richard. And with that, I'll let you go.
Single mom with a whole lot of kids. Somebody got hurt. It's not like you're going to have the insurance and the ability to take somebody to a hospital when you're not sure what to do. And so some really bad choices of trying to not lose her children. And so in looking at all of this, we can't take that day back. She can't take that day back.
I could personally hear it in her that she sounds like someone different and someone who is wanting to do better. And, as she stated, she wants to work herself back into the community that she's looking to transition into.
If I could go back to that day, the first thing that I would have did, my first decision, instead of calling somebody to come pick up my kids, I would have called the police. I would have called the police and told them what happened, and I would have sit there and waited until they got there.